Yesterday, I spent most of the day in the shop working on old Spence's engine, specifically on the fuel injectors. We took each one of these, rebuilt them, balanced them, and installed them in the engine. At the same time, I went through the valve clearances, found a few nuts loose, a few valves that were a little off. So it was a good thing I did that. And then this morning, I decided, okay, I'm almost ready to hit the road, but I really want to do an oil change. And when I decided to do the oil change, I started finding other little things I needed to do. When I had old Spence up in the air for the oil change, I decided to check the wheel bearings. And one of them, of course, you could feel a little play. Look at now, there's no play. This is kind of how you can check the play. If they're rocking like this, I should have filmed this before I made the adjustment on one of these. But I pulled them off. It appears the bearings have been recently replaced and packed properly. It's just that those adjusting nuts were a little bit loose, so I readjusted them, and I'm real happy with the condition of these front wheel bearings. I wanted to check coolant level before hitting the road, and I went over to the coolant reservoir tank, and I'm thinking, oh, guess what we're going to see here? We're going to get to see something that never gets changed. What do you think? Yeah, look at that. Old, worn out, spring's probably weak, nice groove in the rubber seal. If you're losing coolant and wondering where it's going, you might want to take a close look at your cap, because when this gets in this condition, you'll actually lose coolant out of the overflow tube right here. So I'm going to toss that in the trash, and we're going to install a brand new cap on old Spence here, and that's one more thing done. Some of you may have noticed in a previous video that the engine was squeaking a little bit at idle. That's indicative of loose belts, and sure enough, these two alternator belts were loose. So I decided to tighten them up, and I found out that these are new belts, but they were not installed properly. I know it's going to be kind of hard to see this, but I'll just briefly explain it. There's your adjusting nut right there, 13 millimeter socket. You move it in and out to tighten or loosen the belts, and people do that and they damage that. But before you make any adjustment, you have to loosen these bolts. There's two of them. There's one up high here. You can see I'm using this ratcheting box here to tighten this one back down. And there's one on the bottom. You have to loosen these two bolts first before you adjust it with that nut, or you're going to end up busting up your adjustment. And I see that so often. What happened here was these two big bolts were loose. The adjustment was made, but if you don't tighten up the two big bolts after you adjust the belt tension, it's going to loosen up on its own. You can see how loose this was. And here's just a little tip I want to add. When you're adjusting your alternator, be sure and check the condition of this rear plug, that it's not broken up or deteriorating. This is a common cause of charging problems. So with those items taken care of, I'm feeling better now. Maybe just putting this in and adding the oil, we will be ready. We will actually be ready to give this a serious road test. I'm going to install the new filter. I just want to make a couple comments about this cap. Always change these little O-rings here. This one didn't even have the O-rings, and I don't think people realize that if these O-rings are not sealing the oil filter housing, the oil will drain away, and it takes a while to build up oil pressure, and that's a problem over time. Make sure that you install one new O-ring. I've seen 2 diesel engines ruin, one because they forgot the O-ring, and one because they put 2 on. If you put 2 on, it will leak, and you cannot believe how fast that oil can pump out of that oil filter housing. Most of the time you get out on the road, you don't even know what's going on until you hear the engine start to seize. Make sure when you put this in that it drops down into place. You will have to move some of these vacuum lines and hoses. Just be careful with the vacuum lines. You might end up pulling a few of these vacuum lines and then you go to drive the car and your transmission won't shift. And when you drop this down, just make sure all those vacuum lines are clear. And make sure it's seated, and then you immediately get these nuts on and tighten them down. Don't go away thinking, oh, I'll come back and torque these nuts later. You get these down and you get them tight before you do anything else. Now I want to say something about the video today. It's going to be very long. It's typical of the on-demand videos that I do that I put on my website. And it's much more detailed than most of the videos you see on YouTube. I found that most enthusiasts won't watch a video that long unless it has to do with something they're really interested in or something they have to fix on their car. I've decided in honor of Spence to put all my on-demand videos, there's over 300 of them, on sale on my website for 50% off. The other thing I want those of you who haven't been following me for very long to realize is everything you see me working on and fixing, most of those items are available for sale on my website. I had one person ask after I did the video on the fuse box, hey, where do you buy those fuses? So when you see me working on old Spence and you see me replacing a part, I carry it, I sell it. And what's unique about our website is we include instructions, and there's not many other websites that do that. So I'm going to grab the wrench here. And even before I go off scene here, I'm going to tighten these bolts down. And after I do that, I'm going to put new oil in old Spence, and we're rolling this thing out of the shop. So I hope you enjoy this video. Sit back, watch it, and you're going to be surprised at the end. If you own or are working on an old Mercedes diesel engine, either a 4 or 5 cylinder, even the early 6 cylinders, and you know you have a healthy engine, this is real critical here, you have to have a healthy engine, then I believe that the best performance upgrade you can make on that engine is to install new fuel injector nozzles, the ones we get right out of Germany. And in this video, we're going to be doing that here to old Spence behind me. I'm going to take you through some of the steps and explain some of the procedures. It won't be complete because I do have a full-blown manual and video instructions that come with my kits here. But right now, I want to show you what you're going to need on your workbench in order to do this. You know, some people just get the nozzle and just put it in the injector and stick it back in the engine. I think that's what the person did that had this car, because the pressures were releasing too low. So you need a way to test the injector once you install the new nozzle. And I'll explain a little bit more about that. But right now, I'm just going to show you everything here on the bench that you'll need and the things that we offer on my website. I've developed this product so that you have 3 options. You can buy just the pressure tester, and it comes with what you see here, the tester, the handle, and the accessories which are in this box. You can also buy a deluxe version which includes the nozzles and the shim kit, because you're going to need to use these little shims to adjust the release pressure once you install the new nozzles. We also sell just nozzle. Let's say you've already got a pressure tester and you just want the nozzles, or you've got nozzles and you want just the shim kit. We sell those individually as well. And along with all this, there's a few other things you're going to need. And the reason I don't include these in our deluxe kit is some owners already have a dial caliper. Some owners already have a torque wrench. Some already have the injector socket, and some people already have or are going to get the injector return hoses separately. But this is kind of a summation of everything you're going to need if you're going to pull your old injectors, take them apart, clean them, install new nozzles, pressure test them, adjust the pressure, and install them back into your engine properly. So I want to explain a little bit about this pressure tester. We call it the pop tester. When you receive it, it'll come with the tester looking like this, the handle, you'll get a book, and you'll get this accessory box. And I want to talk about what's required to get this set up, because you're going to pull this bottle out, and there's some other things in here that you're going to want to use to set up the tester. We ship it without the gauge, and you may ask, well, why do you do that? Well, we had so many problems with broken gauges in shipping that we decided we could not do that. So you will have to install the new gauge. We already put some Teflon tape on it, so you can just put this on and tighten it down. And when you tighten it down, I'm not going to do it right now. When you tighten it down, you're going to want to have it facing this direction, the direction that you pump, okay? So I'll get this up in the vise and tighten it here in a second. Then on this side, you're going to install the high pressure line, which allows you to hook a fuel injector up. And this can be tightened down. When you tighten this down, this compresses the fitting and seals it. So you'd have to tighten this down pretty well when you get this. So the injector then goes on this end, and this is our fume capture bottle. I developed this because I feel it's very dangerous to be breathing diesel fumes while you're working with these injectors. The spray is so fine and the mist is so fine that it gets all in the air, and you're just putting that right in your lungs. So this is hooked up to the side of the pressure tester, and then the bottle holds the injectors. So when you're pumping and checking spray pattern, it's going to be spraying into this bottle, and we give you 10 feet of hose, clear hose, which attaches to this nipple here, and you route that outside through a window if you're working in your garage. And we also include, some filters. Always filter your diesel fuel when you're putting it in the tester. And I even put in a couple of bolts with locking nuts, because you're going to want to bolt this down. And I'm going to show you in a minute here what we bolted onto. We make a little platform and bolt it down on the platform. So it elevates this right here and gets it up so you can really see what's going on. So now I'm going to take you over to the bench. We're going to tighten up the gauge. We're going to get this set up. We're going to show you how we bolt it to my bench. And we're going to start testing. You can see we've got it set up. It's really important to get it locked down on something. When you start pumping this thing and building it up to 1900, 2000 PSI, this thing really wants to rock. And you can see I put this on an elevated stand. Notice what I used here. I used some 4x6s and a piece of plywood to give this some weight. So we installed the gauge, we put the hard line on, and you can see I've hooked up this capture bottle. We plugged it right into the side here, and you want to put about an inch or so. The purpose of this little cup in here is to divert the spray so you can actually see the spray pattern before it hits the fluid. If you were to squirt right in the fluid, it'd be splashing all over the place, and you couldn't even tell whether you had a good spray pattern. And then the most important thing is I've used the hose and hooked onto the fitting on this cap and then run it outside. So we're ready to test. You have to take and lock it up first. And if you're just filling this the first time, it's going to take quite a few pumps to fill up the chamber before you actually start building pressure. I've already been doing some testing, so this one is going to come up very quickly. All right, now as soon as you start feeling pressure, you're going to see the needle rising. Now, if it's a weak injector or there's some internal leaks, you'll get very rapid leak down internally. That doesn't mean you can't test it, but it's giving you an indication it's not the best. This is one of the injectors that I pulled out of Old Spence that was running kind of okay. It wasn't the worst one. And let's see what it releases at. Watch the gauge closely. I'm going to bring it up real slowly, and then let's see when it releases. Look, it's leaking down before it's even releasing. And that's not good. There's something worn out inside this injector. So I'll bring it up again, okay? Now we can check the spray pattern. See it popping? That's kind of why we call it a pop tester. Look at it pop. And the spray pattern is not all that bad. If you recall, I did say that I thought these injectors had been rebuilt because the nozzles look fairly new, but the pressure's way too low. Look at that. It's releasing up here at about 1500 PSI, and it should be about 1950 PSI for a turbocharged engine. So we've got to take this apart, install the new nozzle, and shim it up. But before we do that, we have to just test it to get a reference, and then we have to use shims to get the pressure up to 1950 on all 5 of these injectors. I want to show you now how a mechanical diesel fuel injector operates on these old diesels. You can see I've got it taken apart in the order with which it came apart. And then I've got some other things that I will explain as we go along. I'm not intending in this video to give you complete details on how to rebuild these fuel injectors. That comes in my manual. I've written an extensive manual that goes through the whole procedure, including in the back where I explain what you have to do to make adjustments and what you have to do if you're having problems. So if you've got, like here's a whole section on chasing diesel fuel injector leaks. If you have problems, it shows how we do the polishing operation. And then here's my testing charts that I provide for you, which will allow you to test each injector and then make notes on its current pressure so you can make adjustments when you do your final testing. So that's the manual. It's very thorough, and that is included with our pop tester or our complete injector rebuild kits. Okay, let's talk about this fuel injector. You have two halves, upper half, lower half. Here's the nozzle. The nozzle goes right into the bottom of the lower half. And then you have what's called a centerpiece that goes on top of the nozzle. And then you have this small piece here that fits right into the centerpiece. Then you have the spring like that. Then you have the shim right there. The shim drops down into this upper section. The spring pressure is what holds the nozzle closed until it reaches a certain pressure internally in the injector and then releases a spray pattern. We're going to go over to the bench now and show you what a really good injector looks like when it's operating properly. So in order to adjust release pressure, you're going to have to change the shim. These shims come in different thicknesses. What we do is we provide a number of standard shims with a whole bunch of little shims, and you'll have to stack them because complete shim kits are no longer available. So this is the shim kit that we sell or that we include in our complete injector overhaul kit. So you take your dial caliper, this is the original, and we're going to measure it, see? That's 1.24. So if I want to increase pressure, I'm going to have to add shim or get a thicker shim. If I want to reduce pressure, I'm going to have to find a shim that, no, that one's bigger. So here's one that's smaller, see? And I go over in my manual what you'll have to do to estimate increasing pressure or decreasing pressure, how much you'll have to add, but a little bit of it's trial and error. This centerpiece is critical to the sealing of the injector. It will leak. Remember, there's no gaskets in here. It's all metal-to-metal contact. And when you tighten the two halves down, it's very critical that you use the proper torque. If you over-tighten them, you can score this centerpiece. See the scoring right there? So this one I will not use. Fortunately, I have extra ones here. But this scoring, these little lines that you see, will cause leaks between the halves when the engine is running. What we do to test each one of these and see how good they are is we just get a flat piece of glass. We use 2000 grit sandpaper and we polish them. And when you polish it, and you don't have to polish it very much. Remember, you can't take metal off here. If you try to sand these grooves out, it's going to leak. I've tried it and it doesn't work. So if you have a centerpiece that looks like this, then your best option is try to get another fuel injector that you can rob the parts out of, or I do carry some of these on my website. They're kind of limited supply, but the first thing you want to do is polish these on a plate with 2000 wet or dry and inspect them right away to see whether they're smooth on both sides. And you'll also want to polish this. This is the other seating surface. And if this is scored badly too, then you'll need to find another used injector. Remember, new injectors are not available. You're going to have to source parts from the used market. And of course, you want these thoroughly cleaned and blown out with compressed air, particularly these holes up here. We provide a little wire that you can put down in these holes to clean them out. These get gummed up and you'll get false readings when you try to test the injector. So these need to be thoroughly cleaned with a brass brush and mineral spirits or paint thinner, and then use compressed air to blow them out. Cleanliness is very important when reassembling these injectors. Okay, watch right here. Right that. Look at that. Right there. 1950. Pop. Okay, come down and look at the spray pattern. This is a really good spray pattern. Notice it's got a good fan, not too wide. You don't want it too narrow, but I think this fan right here is ideal. And watch it pop. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So we've got the injector together, finger tight. And you're going to need to use a vise to tighten these down. You want to put it in upside down, and then you're going to use a 1 1/16" our special socket, deep socket. You have to be very careful. Do not damage the tip when you're putting that on there. And now we want to torque it to 75 foot-pounds, no more. There it is. Okay. I think one of the problems I see with these injectors is people over-torque the 2/2, and then they over-torque it when they put it into the engine. So the first test is with the original shim. Let's see what it fires at. Oh, you're kidding me. Are we right there? Or are we a little high? It's very seldom. Okay, that's firing just over 1950, which is close enough. We don't have to do anything with this. But if you have a situation where you need to add shims, what we found is that adding a thin 0.05 shim will increase the pressure 75 to 100 pounds. We weren't so fortunate on the other 4. They all needed slight adjustments. But look at how nice these look. With all new nozzles installed, we're ready to put these back in Old Spence. I've installed the rebuilt injectors in Old Spence's engine here, but I want to double check that valve adjustment before we hook up the hard lines and put an injector return hose. We pull the valve cover off. A couple things I've noticed. One is the chain is very tight. I swear that this can't be the original engine with 330,000 miles. And the lobes are all in good shape. So I've begun to do the valve adjustment here. Some of them are loose. We just did a few, and you can see that I'm using the chart that comes in the back of my manual. This will let you keep track. You don't try to do them in order. You just turn the engine over until you get a few of these up, and then you can check it with the feeler gauges. Once you know that you've set the clearance, you can just come in and put an X. So that works real well. Now I've been working on number 5. The exhaust was pretty loose. It was probably about 15 to 16 thousandths. Wasn't tight. Now we're going to check the intake. Note we've got the lobes sticking straight up. We're going to use a feeler gauge and set this to about 4 thousandths. What I do is I make sure a 5 doesn't go in and that a 4 does go in. So I'm using a helper because sometimes this is easy. That's your 5, that didn't go in, okay. So the intake on number 5 is set properly, but I'm just going to double check the tightness because I found some of these nuts aren't tight enough. Okay, oh, sure enough, look at that. That just isn't tight enough. So we'll get those snug down. So I'm going to have to check every one of these, both for clearance and for tightness of the adjusting nuts. Oh, we're getting close here. All the valves are adjusted. I went ahead and cleaned and modified the valve cover. By the way, I have a modification of the valve cover. If you have an old diesel valve cover that leaks even after installing a new valve cover gasket, I have the answer for you, but it's on my website as one of my on-demand videos. This month I'm putting all my on-demand videos on sale for half price. If you've never seen one of these, just go to my website. You're going to find some videos that can really help you with some major repair work. These aren't just touch and go videos. These are serious repair and troubleshooting videos that I have for sale on my website now until the end of October at 50% off. Now I'm going to go ahead and take this and put it on. You have to be really careful. Notice we've cleaned this up, got the new gasket on there, and when you drop it down on there, you want to make sure you don't dislodge the gasket. You're going to have to kind of rock it in behind this. Rock it in like that, set it up. Okay, just drop it down like that. Uh-oh, something's, you got to make sure you don't get a hose under here. Okay, yeah, there we go. I got that Alda line catching on the back there. Okay, once I drop the valve cover, I'm going to wiggle it. This will help me determine whether the gasket is rolled up on any location. I'm just check all the way around. Okay, it's down seated. We're going to put the new nuts and new wave washers on there, tighten this down, then we're going to put this thing back together. We're in the process of putting the injector return hoses back on old Spence's engine after rebuilding the injectors. I'm going to try a little experiment which was recommended by a viewer. Take shrink tubing, maybe just a little bit larger, cut about 1/2 inch, and we're going to put it on each end of this hose, and we're going to see if the heat of the engine will shrink that tubing down to help prevent fraying of the ends of these injector return hoses. Okay, we just cranked the engine over to bleed the injector lines. We have a little bit of fuel coming out of each one, and we're going to tighten these down. That's the last one. Let's double check this one. Okay, we're good. Now it's first time starting, and it probably run a little rough, but let's see how this smooths out. This is what we live for around here at Mercedessource. Whoa, come on, a little air in there. Okay, let's smooth out. All right. We roll this outside, and now I want to have you hear this run. Bring the camera in close. This is unbelievable. Look at that. And we've even got it idle down. I know I'm going to have to do something about this, but at this point, this is one amazing turbo diesel engine. I got to listen to this one more time before I go home today. Now, the last time we started it, we did it without glow, and we're going to do it again without glow. Granted, the engine is warm, but not hot. Okay, crank it up. Look at that. Oh, sweet 16. Maybe we can write a song on that.